How did crypto bros become such a powerful political force?
They should not be subject to the same regulation as banks.
Why is the right considered today's counterculture?
They're all way better than this!
When did clean energy become too lip-coated?
Confront the climate crisis.
Just some of the stuff we explore in the Culture Lab, the marvelous mad science of how the zeitgeist shapes our politics. Hosted by data scientists and pollsters, Kyler Van Ellenfitch and Gabe DeRoche. Join every week as they bring together data, their own insights, and a special guest to put a different loaded question under the microscope. Culture Lab, a brand new podcast from Air Quotes Media, creators of Curse of Politics, The Herle Burley, and Hotel Pacifico. Subscribe now.
All right, you happily miserable accursed. It's Herle here with a little housekeeping to get us started on the Curse of Politics. Did you catch that trailer off the top for Air Quotes Media's brand new podcast? Culture Lab, the marvelous mad science of how the zeitgeist shapes our politics. If you're a regular listener to the Herle Burley, you already know one of the whip-smart, dialed-in co-hosts, Kyler Van Ellenfitch. The other is Gabe DeRoche. And in a gray world of data and polling political podcasts, this is the one that knows that Bad Bunny isn't a hunk of shitty Easter chocolate. Subscribe now. The first show releases soon. All right, let's get to the curse. Jordan is here with us. Scott will be here, but he's running a bit late today. But Kory is here. But some rather large news. This is Kory's final appearance for about 4 months. Until the BC Conservative leadership race is over, he's off to run Caroline Elliott's campaign. Kory, don't know how we're going to do it without you, man.
Oh,
turtlenecks and hair gel.
Really rude of you to have day jobs and interfere with us.
Yeah, well, the problem with media commentary, people have pointed out to me over the last little while, is sometimes it can be controversial, and I don't feel it would be right to have all of my loudmouth opinions, ascribed to somebody I'm working with. So I think it's probably better for Caroline and better for me to have a little separation of church and state here. While in that role, which I guess we've done before. For some reason, you guys wouldn't let me do the podcast during the provincial election while I was managing the campaign there either. I don't know. I would have been completely neutral on my assessment of how my performance was going.
I'm just not going to say anything because, unlike you, I don't get asked to do campaigns anymore. So,
now you've made a mistake, David. Now you're going to get offers all the time to come and do campaigns. I bet you that the Trudeau government would have found a campaign somewhere for you to work on.
I'm sure somewhere.
Final 18 months of
I think Northern Alberta is really nice. You could have a good time.
Exactly. Hey, Kory, have you got a place lined up to stay in Vancouver?
Oh man, we're bracketing in, but we got a couple offers going in on spots today. But I'm rather partial to the Pacific Rim hotel and the building there. So I've got a couple.
Man of the people, Kory Teneycke.
Well, hey, it's beautiful, and you have access. Speaking of spas, you have access to their spa. It's quite lovely, and I feel like I'm going to need an hour of spa every once in a while to bring the stress level down.
Well, I'm very jealous because I think Vancouver would be an amazing place to spend 4 months. These are probably the right 4 months to do it. So enjoy it out there. Good luck to you. Now, we have a show to do today. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to talk about post-analysis of the Conservative Convention. We're going to talk about the NDP leadership race because they released their financial figures last week. And our curse clipping is from Spencer Van Dyke at CTV News. Danielle Smith says her caucus members are free to sign any petition they want to, including one pushing for separation from Canada. Then, as always, the great Gordon Pinsent and our Hey-Yous. So, since Reid's not here, let's leave the Conservatives for a minute, Jordan, and let's talk about the NDP race. So I haven't seen any membership numbers I don't know if there are going to be any. I haven't
They're
seen
not out
any.
yet.
Haven't seen any polling, but I have seen financial numbers. And so I would say that nobody's raised very much money, but Avi-Lewis has raised more money than the other two. And media are jumping to the conclusion that this means he must be the front runner in the race. Would you concur?
So I think the financials that you're talking about that came out recently, just to point out, those are Q4. So it's not a full picture. But Avi's reportedly raised over $1 million at this point. So that is significant in the campaign and puts him well out front for fundraising. The question of membership, though, is also really important. And we don't know those details yet in terms of which campaign has signed up how many new members relative to existing members. I think you could surmise that Avi's probably out ahead in that as well, although likely not by quite as much as with the fundraising totals that we've seen so far. So I think that he is probably now positioned as the one to beat. But there's still 2 months to go. So there is now the way it works, of course, there's a membership sign-up cutoff, which happened last week. So now it's sort of phase 2 of the leadership campaign, which is all around persuasion and turnout, right? So there is an opportunity for things to shift, and I think Heather is obviously closest on his heels there in terms of capacity to potentially catch up with him, and Rob not too far behind her. So there's a bit of a competition happening there for voters who are not interested in Avi between Rob and Heather. But because it's a ranked ballot, sometimes unpredictable things can happen. And then that second ballot strategy can be really important as well. So I'd say, yep, Avi in the lead right now, but not insurmountable. And there could be some interesting conversations to be had about how people are ranking their choices.
So, George, just to stick with you for a second on this, we've talked about this, and we've sort of, I think all the people on this podcast have made it clear that we think Lewis is not a great choice because of the kinds of issues he's identifying and the kinds of approach he's going to take to issues and to politics, and that we think the NDP need to get closer to its economic roots and to fighting on economics rather than fighting on other issues. We've all sort of talked about that, and I think you're kind of broadly in agreement with that yourself. Why does the NDP grassroots see that differently?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a classic leadership race conundrum, right? Because the same things that will motivate the base of a party and even can grow the base of a party aren't necessarily the same things that are going to be appealing to the general population in a general election. So there's always, I think, a bit of a mismatch in motivation there. And look, I don't actually want to diminish what Avi's doing, because I think that he is generating excitement and clearly he's generating fundraising numbers. So there is something there. But whether that can translate out into the broader population and answer some pretty hard electoral questions for the party, that really remains to be seen. Because if you look at, even just the last election, the NDP lost more seats to the Conservatives than they did to the Liberals. So there has to be a pretty frank assessment of whether that approach and those strategies are going to be the ones that could potentially bring some of those seats back into the fold. And I don't think we've seen him really pressed on that so far. And my expectation is that'll happen over the course of the next couple months, particularly as they get into an English language debate. But he should be able to show both that he's got the capacity to win. He hasn't ever won a seat as a candidate for the party. He came third in the last election and just in April in Vancouver Centre. So he needs to be able to show he has some capacity himself to win. And that he has a path to bringing back not just people in urban centers like downtown Toronto, but that he can reach out in places like Sault Ste. Marie, like the interior of BC. So I think that that's really what the focus will be on over the next few months. And, I think that this is why you're seeing particularly a lot of people who've been involved in the party for a while put their support behind other candidates, because they also understand how challenging it is, too, to have a leader who doesn't have a seat. Because name me the safe seat in the country where Lewis would be able to run.
Right.
That will be a significant draw on the party as they go through a pretty crucial rebuilding period. So I think there are some very real pragmatic questions for his campaign where he's going to have to answer them in terms of what his path would be. But I would say I would have concerns about his approach in terms of his ability to connect with regular voters. I reserve the right to be surprised as well, because I do think he is demonstrating some capacity to rally people and to excite people through the course of this leadership race, and that's part of it as well.
No gimmicks, no lack of control, no vulnerabilities, and no data leaving Canadian borders. Well, that's a declarative sentence, if I've ever heard one. And it teases the rest of the data security and sovereignty story built right into Fuel iX, our presenting sponsor TELUS's generative AI platform. So let's dive a bit deeper. Fuel iX has a long list of industry-leading tech features. I mean, I've been talking about them here for weeks. But what really makes it stand apart is an ironclad commitment to security at every level. They've given that commitment a name, of course, Fortify, a system that continuously tests for security vulnerabilities lurking around digital corners, so businesses stay ahead of any evolving threat. There's more. Fuel iX's Gen AI customer support tool is the first to be internationally certified in privacy by design. That's privacy for AI inference and data storage that does not leave Canadian borders. Canadian businesses can effectively manage, monitor, and maintain their Gen AI workflows across the entire operation, all of which makes Fuel iX a sovereign AI solution. Not a trendy marketing gimmick that happens to fit the zeitgeist, rather a purposeful design that allows all users, from startup to small business to the largest Canadian research institutions, to feel confident their sensitive data meets top-tier sovereignty standards. Next week, more from TELUS on the importance of consistent sovereignty standards and the recently announced Buy Canadian policy. Kory, I'll have to tell you, I watched Lewis, and I think that he is more likely to ensure the defeat of Nenshi and Eby and Beck than he is to elect federal New Democrats.
I agree with that. But I'm not sure that he can win. Like even if he's leading, the dynamic that Jordan was talking about around preferential ballots and these kinds of races are, that's a real thing. Like, and you get some weird results. But I look back to Stéphane Dion's victory. Like when you have two candidates that are perceived as being the front runners battling it out, you can get weird results. You can have the third person leap forward, or if the third person and the second person are a lot more aligned, they unite to defeat the first. But I think Avi's such a polarizing character that his ability to grow down ballot, I gotta assume, is less than the other two. So maybe he is so far out front that, he gets a first ballot win, or he's so close to a first ballot win that none of that matters. But like the worst place to end up is, say, where Max Bernier was in the leadership where Andrew Scheer won, where you're the leading candidate, but your growth potential is essentially nil. And, you end the race more or less where you started, and you just slowly watch as people fall off the ballot, that collapse. So I'm not convinced that he's going to be the winner, but I'll live in your let's pretend world of like he does end up winning. I think that if Jagmeet Singh was bad for Carla Beck, for instance, in Saskatchewan, yes, Avi Lewis is worse. There is no question. And I think worse for Nenshi. I think worse for Eby. I think like this guy believes a lot of stuff that's, I think, outside the mainstream, like maybe very activating for progressive hardcore base that's out there that'll buy membership and a leadership, but can be weaponized so easily in a general election against your candidacy and against people who share your party labels. So I don't know. I think it's bad news for the NDP if this guy wins, but I don't
He's
know.
just out there, Scott, running against fossil fuels like crazy, like bemoaning the fact that EB is selling LNG, right? Which
Right.
has got to be such a minority opinion in British Columbia right now.
You would think. It's a great luxury of not being in elected politics and not bumping into people who don't share your views. I mean, when your exposure to politics is sitting around with people who agree with you and buy you drinks, then it's easy to fall down a hole. But I still think, I mean, look, let's preface this with the obvious point. And this I should say, by the way, at the beginning of every pod, I know fuck all. All right. Like, I mean, literally, the dynamics of the NDP leadership race. Why don't I talk about how to repair the space shuttle? Okay. So I recognize that I'm
with a wrench,
yeah, exactly. I assume.
I think
I mean, what
duct
else would you start with, right?
Pay
And
attention
I'm talking
to the
about the
tiles.
leadership.
I think the tiles can matter. I would pay attention to
Oh,
the
I
tiles.
heard,
No,
I
I've
heard
heard
that.
that.
I heard
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, glue them twice. And I think that's my attitude toward the NDP leadership. Glue it down twice. And I don't feel like Avi's too glued down, but I still think, and I mean, this is, what do I know? But I think that he brings an energy and voice and activism that the party at some level might be drawn toward, just going, my God, are we just like better to burn out than fade away? Aren't we just kind of like turning into a sepia toned photograph where people go, oh, I remember those guys. But anyway, back to today. And so I wonder if that will be the essential dynamic that fuels his leadership. But I agree with you. I think he's more likely to get people unelected than he is to fuel any kind of caucus explosion. Maybe he helps them in downtown Toronto. Maybe he makes that competitive. But as long as Donald Trump is stomping around, I think he is likely going to get pushed out even in those places. And so I think it's really, really very interesting to watch how this unfolds. And I take Kory's caution carefully just on the internal works of preferential ballots. I mean, we saw Scheer win. We saw Dalton McGuinty at 4:30 in the morning win, coming from fourth place. We saw Dion win. We've seen these races produced strange results. And so watch out for Ashton. Who knows, right? Like that could be the way that thing comes together. But
that normally happens though when there's a lot of people on the ballot.
That's right. You have to have a lot of candidates, and there has to be a stated and vociferous, like emotional anti-movement against one, right? So there has to be that. And I don't know if the party feels that way. They might. I don't know. But I don't know.
I wouldn't say there has to be lots, though. Like, just like in terms of what's the bandwidth where you're in trouble? If you're below 35,
yep.
And then I think you're as a front runner that's polarizing candidate.
What
I think
Bernier came in at like 32 or something like that on the first ballot, right? And then you were like, he's just going to get bled out. He's going to get up to 36 and then never get higher.
And you have to think about what the overlap of voter choice would be for the other candidates in the race, right? So, what is like Heather's voters? What are her choices going to be? They're probably not going to be ranking Avi very high. Rob voters, maybe you would see some crossover as, two outsider candidates, but probably not a whole lot, because somebody who's very interested in Rob is probably not going to be necessarily super motivated by what Avi's putting in the window. So I do think that the analysis that, well, he may have a stronger result first ballot, that there could be a cap on that growth. I think that feels pretty accurate to me at the moment. But again, 2 months to go.
Last week, Prime Minister Carney struck a mix of straight talk and optimism in the House of Commons. He told lawmakers that things in the United States are not business as usual right now. Even so, he said Canada is still keeping up regular trade conversations with the administration in Washington. This is a good thing. Aspirational talk about diversifying Canada's exports is important, and the government should absolutely seek bilateral trade deals abroad. Our sponsor, CN, heartily supports any arrangements that help Canadian exporters get their goods to market. But currently, the vast majority of our trade is with the United States, and Canada enjoys better access than just about any other nation to American markets. That's because the United States has largely respected the terms of the Canada-Mexico-US trade agreement. But CUSMA is under review. The three parties have until July 1st, Canada Day, to decide whether to endorse and extend the treaty. So it's a negotiation, and a crucial one. We're talking here about a treaty that governs a market of 500 million people with nearly $2 trillion in annual trade. The fact is, Canada and the United States benefit greatly from one another. It's no one-sided relationship. Canada supplies many products that U.S. industries and consumers rely on: uranium, potash, oil, electricity, grain, minerals, and a wide range of manufactured goods. CN plays a significant role in moving many of these commodities. The company believes that efficient, predictable, cross-border trade supports healthy competition and contributes to higher standards of living in both countries. As discussions evolve, there may inevitably be proposals or terms that are not in our interest. If left there, both countries will ultimately lose. But approaching these constructively and with a focus on shared prosperity will help ensure the relationship continues to thrive.
Can Rob Ashton get elected with that Sir Mackenzie Bowl beard, or is he going to have to do something different?
Well, there's only ever been
I
one
like the fact
NDP
that he looks
leader
different
in the past with a beard. So,
I don't think he can. I don't think he can get elected prime minister looking like that. But I think he can get elected to keep Mark Carney honest looking like that, with that beard. And what, you don't?
I think the French is more of a problem than the beard. But
yeah,
I think they go hand in hand. He's got a
I'm going to do it. I'm going to
Eastern
do a plug.
Ontario woodcutter look to him.
I'm going to do a plug for one of my favorite podcasts, which is the Rest is History podcast. If you haven't listened to it,
I love it. I love Dominic.
Take a listen. Yes, yeah, they're great, but they have an ongoing thing about the greatest beards in history.
Yes,
and there's like an ongoing discussion of the importance of a good beard in political history. So maybe
there could be room
back
for one
in the
more
future.
here.
There could be room for this. Anyway,
I thought their consistent conclusion was that beards defeat candidates. But anyway, David, I'm sorry.
Beards and real talk. That might be where we're at.
From the start of the 20th century, I think that's been true, and Mulcair proved it.
Another reason why I will not run for office.
He would feel compelled to tell you it was the second best result in the party's history.
Yeah, I'm sure
he would.
I'm sure he would. Jordan, what are the private sector unions saying?
Yeah, I mean, look, the private sector unions are for sure interested in bringing the party back into greater alignment with the labor movement. And, I think you've seen some pretty significant labor endorsements going to Ashton. I mean, Avi's got some larger sections of public sector unions, but it's really public sector unions and not coming out of the private sector. So no, I mean, Ashton's really doing very, very well in terms of those labor endorsements. And of course, that's not just something where it's significant because union members might follow where their leadership endorses. That's significant because that comes with organizing resources. You get a big endorsement from Steel, that's coming with folks on the ground who are going to be helping your campaign to grow in key areas and so on and so forth. So I think the labor movement, broadly speaking, has made it pretty clear where they would like to go in backing Ashton's campaign. And I think that will be significant because of the machinery that comes with it, not just the leadership value of it, but also that capacity building that it gives to any campaign who secures those endorsements.
I haven't met a lot of NDP voters in those unions in a long time, so like the value would be different in BC than it would be in Ontario. Right, like I think it depends where you are. It might be higher in Manitoba than it is in Ontario, but like it depends where you are. Like I think there's a mix. If you look at how locals in those unions have voted and who they've supported, it's not uniform. There are pockets where I think the NDP still are the front runners within the leadership and probably doing quite well with the membership. Like Oregon did very well with those voters. EB is not Oregon. And
But that's a general election analysis.
Yeah, but
right?
again, this is a one member, one vote leadership race.
But sure, but you still rely on, like, the leadership are not big in number. Let's weather the leadership, right? Like, you still have to get people who are line union members to actually go out and do things for you, and they're more willing to do it for some people than others. So anyway, could be, in a point system would be very different. Anyway, I think I think it could be spotty, but I guess we'll see when the votes are cast.
All right.
Can I add one churlish note? Just like
why not?
Wait,
well,
other than sepia toned?
Just to be catty. No, that was to the party overall. I want to say something churlish about Avi-Lewis. The idea of Avi-Lewis is better than Avi-Lewis. Like, people say, well, he is a, when you hear people describe him, like when I'm on TV and we're like doing like the intro will inevitably be, and former broadcaster with strong communication skills, Avi-Lewis. I don't think he's actually that commanding in front of me. Like, he is not his old man or his grandfather. He does not light up a room. He's not as, he could make an argument. He's literate. I don't mean to suggest otherwise, but he is not
his father was one of the most articulate people in history,
possibly the greatest orator Canada's ever produced, like right in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder if one of the dynamics is, if you're sitting down in a small pub and it's come meet Avi, maybe that's fine, sitting around having a beer and chatting. But if you like see him in a hall and you're like, I'm expecting this guy to be all that, I don't think he's as gripping. He's not Churchill. He's not David Lewis. He's not a spell-binding stem winder of a speech giver. So I just throw that little note out there.
Wouldn't you say a version of the same about Nenshi? Like,
well, I have almost no time for Nenshi. I don't think he's very good flat out. I really don't. I think he's pompous and hard to take and his presentation is uniformly awful. So he's just going to get smug.
His campaign manager's a great guy.
All right. Slow your roll, people. One broad-faced attack at a time. Look, I think when it comes to Avi, I would agree that I think what animates Avi when I see him speak, like, he's really driven by policy, and so that's like not an uncommon thing, particularly among newer.
But in the yearbook committee way, don't you think? It doesn't feel rooted in real life. It's more like
we're seconds away from spending too much time on this.
Yeah. I mean, right. I think it's rooted in a pretty strong activist tradition with the NDP. Like, it's a very familiar dynamic to me, I would say. You see that in riding associations across the country. It's not always a bad thing. We've had other leaders come out of that segment of the party as well. But I would say that the strength that he offers, I would say, is more actually on social media. Like, he is a better communicator on social media than he is maybe perhaps as a straight speech giver. And I would argue that's probably a lot more important today than the ability to give a great speech, notwithstanding what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. So we'll see. We'll see. Again, it's really about, can he transcend any enthusiasm that's happening within the base of the party to appeal more broadly to a general population? I think the jury is still out on that. And I still think it's close, but it's by no means done. And there's still very much a path both for Heather and for Rob to take it.
It was the speech heard round the world, to riff on an idiom, Mark Carney's 15 minutes on stage in Davos about the present global order and taking the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. For nostalgia is not a strategy, said the Prime Minister, doubling down on the theme. It was a monumental bit of truth-telling, and it strikes our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute, that these same truths, having a clear-eyed plan for the present and the future, hold for climate issues and the clean energy transition. So let's throw nostalgia out the window and take a look at the world as it is in those two realms. You may recognize some of this data. We've been over much of it in this space. The EU, becoming ever more relevant as a trading ally, is now applying a carbon border tariff to key imports. Countries with an effective carbon price, like Canada, get relief. Wind and solar overtook fossil fuels in the EU electricity mix in 2025. Global EV sales grew by 20% last year. And global investment in clean energy technologies reached $2.3 trillion in 2025, trillion with a T. That figure will rise to nearly $3 trillion by 2030. Meanwhile, 2025 was Canada's second worst wildfire season on record due to emissions-spurred climate change effects. Almost 9 million hectares incinerated. Think of the entire province of New Brunswick burning. Insured damages from extreme weather events exceeded $2.4 billion in Canada last year, about 5 times more than 2 decades ago. This data, these truths, are the world as it is. A gauzy rear view gets us nowhere, says the Climate Institute. Best to plan for more change, openly and confidently, and act. Now, since we're tight for time, I'm going to introduce our next topic with a little bit of a aggressive intro, less passive than I normally do, which is, I don't really understand what the Conservatives were doing this weekend in Calgary. They ran, I'll give them the same faint praise that they gave Carney, which is to say it was competent and well done. And he got the number that he wanted out of that. But I would have thought that they would have used this as an opportunity to introduce the subject of Trump in the United States and to reassure Canadians that they understood that threat the way that Canadians understand that threat, and that they could be trusted with the country in their hands, and add that to their domestic bundle of issues. But they must have considered that, thought about it, and decided not to do it, and to basically run things back as they did in 2025. They're running back 2025 almost exactly the same. So, which one of you has a theory about why they're doing that?
Well, I have a theory. You got to secure the leadership before you can have the mandate to do the pivot that you're talking about. And I think we'll get into a version of this with Danielle around people signing petitions and all of that. Your leadership number comes from the votes of the people in that room. And at a party convention, the people in that room are not the general electorate. Like, that's not who the voting pool is. It's a very small subset of the voting public, and the complexion of it is not the same as the voting public. And so what you can do and what the applause lines are going to be in that room are different than what the applause lines would be if you're talking to all Canadians. So, like, I don't see party conventions as the place where you do the big communications pivot to all of Canada. Like, I think time will tell what they take out of that. There was similar to Carney. Like, Carney gave this great speech in Davos, didn't mention Trump by name. You didn't see Poilievre mention Trump by name. Different reasons probably for both of them, making that choice. But there was some oblique references to that stuff. But I think the objective being to make sure that you win the vote in that room. And as a political strategy goes, I don't know. I have trouble finding fault with it, because if he pissed off 8-9% of the people in that room by taking a hard line on Trump, which I think you very easily could do, he's not the leader anymore at the end of that. So I think it makes sense to be a little bit more careful and try to stick on the safer ground.
Can I ask a quick question? Does that mean you think that he will pivot, that wasn't the right time and the right place, but that he will do that? Because I don't think he's gonna.
Well, I think we've seen some examples of some pivot, like the response on the Greenland stuff was a lot clearer, a lot more in Doug Ford territory, frankly, in terms of being aggressive than many of the things that we've seen before. So I don't know. I guess like time will tell, guys. When I come back, we'll have a conversation about all of this, I guess. because I think we'll have enough, enough examples to see where things land. But going into a room full of conservatives in Alberta right now, a lot of them who are, very, pissed at the federal government in ways that, we can talk about the dynamic with Danielle or whatever, but it's a room where, I think your options are a little bit more constrained. And think we've seen some examples of some pivoting outside of this, and we'll see whether there's more or not. But like the time to do the big communication shift, I don't think is at your leadership vote.
The following message is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Not all nicotine products carry the same risk. Smoke-free alternatives like heated tobacco, vaping products, and nicotine pouches don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. While not risk-free, evidence shows they have the potential to be significantly less harmful than cigarettes. Yet, Canadian regulations restrict access and limit communication about these alternatives, keeping adult smokers in the dark. Sweden has accepted this science, embraced smoking harm reduction, and driven smoking rates below 6%. Canada has the tools to do the same, but it requires political will. It's time to align regulation with science, expand access to smoke-free products, and empower Canadians to make informed choices. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is real. Canada can be smoke-free. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
I think that his leadership depends more on whether his poll numbers start to improve than what precise number he got at that convention.
Sure. This was, I think, in many ways, the easy part of trying to secure his leadership. Caucus remains the biggest threat to him. The prospect of any further floor crossings and the prospect of his popularity dropping even further. I mean, right now it's at the lowest it's ever been. The trajectory has been downward since the election. So those are the things I think that really are probably more likely keeping him up at night rather than the convention vote. I think appealing to a few thousand of really the party's most diehard supporters at the convention. I mean, I agree with Kory about why that speech would not present a shift in terms of content. But I do think we continued to see a shift in terms of tone from him. I was really struck in watching the speech. Like that wasn't a bitter guy up there. And that's who we've seen predominantly since last April, was somebody who really had a chip in their shoulder, who was relitigating the last campaign, and who was just angry about it, right? So I think the most favorable thing that can be said about the speech is that they did execute a pretty good and thorough tonal shift. You saw more personality from him. You saw personal stories. You saw no rhyming. He tried to smile. Those, I think, are all important steps. They don't get around the question of the content. And I think that the two most significant content pieces in that speech were, number one, an indication that he has no interest in moderating. So a doubling down on the strategy that he used in the last campaign. And number two, again, a retelling of the campaign as a win, despite it being a pretty catastrophic loss for the Conservatives. So those are the two pieces that I think really remain maybe potentially big stumbling blocks for him in terms of lifting that ceiling on his growth. But I do think that they were able to execute a tonal shift that could be helpful for him over the next little while. And again, that's actually going back to the question of caucus. Just being a bit less of a dick all the time is something that is going to be helpful for him as he returns to Parliament and as he deals with the caucus and as he confronts the possibility of more floor crossers. It wasn't even necessarily just his failing leadership approval numbers that have been causing problems for him, particularly in December. It was also, don't forget, how he reacted to floor crossings and potential floor crossings within caucus that really heightened the stakes. And I think undermined him also. So the really strong and sort of negative response internally was not good for him.
I get what Kory is saying. I just think that if you get 87.4 or 87.5 percent of the party membership, you have the freedom to do whatever you want in that speech. And so and I think there's no question he's in complete command of the party. That was cemented this weekend with this result. We don't know, and we're recording this on Monday morning, so we don't know. There are rumors flying around Ottawa, but then again, so does shit. So who knows? But there are rumors flying around Ottawa. There'll be a floor crosser today. Let's see. But that would be something. But I thought the speech was like David. I thought it was competent. I thought it was a clear signal of everything Kory's saying, which is, we have decided that we are going to speak to the Conservatives largely in a voice that makes sense to them. It could have been given this speech, maybe with a slight twist of the knob in terms of, we're going to add the word hope. It's funny that he actually almost came back to where Trudeau was in 2015 with hope and hard work. Like, it's goddamn similar in terms of its thematic. But this could have been given any time in the past 2-3 years by Poilievre. It's pretty much orthodoxy. And what was missing was, we're going to tackle Trump. And I think the reason...
It has to be the only political speech delivered in the world right now that doesn't even obliquely refer to Trump.
Well, what I think is I don't think it's just a strategic choice. I don't think it's like, well, now is not the right time because I'm in front of a conservative audience. I hear what Kory's saying, but I think if that's their rationale, then they're lying to themselves. I think the real reason is they still haven't figured out what to say about Trump, especially when 49% of conservatives, according to Abacus, have a sympathy towards Trump's policies. That's the fucking problem. Their voter coalition is not where the middle of the country is on this issue. And so he has not figured out how to triangulate this issue. I would have thought it would have been, I was disappointed but not surprised he didn't talk about Trump. I was disappointed and surprised he didn't take a stronger line on separatism. I thought that would have been the easy way to deal with Trump, to say, look, you know what? I want to be prime minister of this country. I want it to be a united country. If there are people in this room who are disappointed, right, about this, or you look at Donald Trump and you're saying, what's going on there? Or you're mad at Ottawa. Well, then I'm telling you this. We start by saying we're committed to a country, and then we're going to address your grievances, and we're going to demand that they address your grievances. But you make your support for Canada not conditional, which is when we get to Premier Smith, what I thought she was dangerously close to saying. He didn't do that either. And so I thought it was a really conservative speech in the sense that it was very cautious. Play the hits, stick to the script. We're not going to deal with Trump. We're not going to deal with separatism. And we'll see what comes. And to me, I hear the party and the leader saying, just leave our money on the table. We're going to let it ride. We're not changing anything. This isn't Harper in 04. It's going to make changes between 04 and 06. This is Poilievre and the Conservatives saying, we're going to let it ride. We believe, and they might be right, we believe that we can run it up again to 41%, and we don't believe that Carney can get 43 next time. So we're going to play the same cards in the same place, but they're missing on Trump, and they're going to have to figure out sooner or later what they want to say to the country on this issue. You cannot dodge that punch.
Energy systems don't get applause. They get tested. During this past week of brutal winter weather, natural gas showed up on the energy stage, big time. As temperatures plunged, natural gas-fueled power plants stepped in to support the grid. At peak moments, they delivered nearly 40% of Ontario's electricity. Proving again, says our sponsor Enbridge Gas, that natural gas is a vital part of Ontario's broader energy system. Behind that show-stopping performance was the Enbridge Gas Dawn Hub, Ontario's energy reserve, stored underground, ready when needed. On January 24th, it was needed, and Dawn set a record. 6.4 billion cubic feet of natural gas withdrawn in a single day. At peak hour on January 25th, natural gas delivered the energy equivalent of nearly 90,000 megawatts across the province, powering the grid, heating homes, keeping businesses running. 75% of Ontario homes rely on natural gas. They stayed warm. Dawn also supports affordability. Gas is purchased and stored in summer when prices are lower, then delivered in winter when demand is highest. This is energy security you can feel. Homes warm, lights on, economy moving. The Dawn Hub is Ontario's energy superpower, says Enbridge Gas. Built for long winters, built for high demand, delivering reliability the province depends on. No applause needed. Let's analyze this story just a little bit clearer, which is to say that Trump came in with a bang in December and January, and Canadians went crazy about it. And that became the political issue. You completely captured that for Doug Ford in the election campaign, right? Carney captured it. And then Trump stopped talking. And because it was such an aberrant thing, people sort of lost focus on that. And that's when the Conservatives got close, is when they were not close in the election as long as Trump was the dominant issue, right? They were going to get blown out, in Ontario in particular, going to get blown out. And then the issue dissipated. The Liberals didn't do a very good job of keeping it alive. Cost of living and affordability reaffirmed itself as an issue. And the election got close. What are the prospects in the next 3 years that we would have an election in which Trump would not be very dominant in that election campaign?
I think they're low, but I'm going to disagree with you guys a little bit, because I think there were some hints in that speech as to how they might be trying to play it. And I don't know for sure if this is what they're doing or not, but let me speculate. Always a dangerous thing to do. I thought, insofar as that came up, it was like his letter that he or statement that he put out with respect to the Davos speech, which is, good job, we're with you, we're here to support you, like to try to essentially create as little distance between Carney on Trump and them on Trump, but to try to take the issue off the table as much as you can by mirroring. Like we're if you want an example of this that we all share, I would say look at Harper in 06, where if we fight, the Conservatives fight an election campaign on healthcare, they're going to lose. And so how do you try to not fight an election on healthcare, even though it's the number one issue? When you ask Canadians, what's the most important thing in this election? They say healthcare. How come that election wasn't on healthcare? Because Harper said, well, yeah, you did this big healthcare deal with the provinces, Prime Minister Martin. No changes, no notes. Yeah, we're going to do exactly the same thing. And you remove the issue by mirroring your opponent. And I suspect that there's an element of that. At least there were, I think, some hints of that, both in the response to the Davos speech and in his remarks at the convention. And I got to say, as a political strategy goes, I don't think it's a bad one. Because I'm not sure that he will out Carney on the Trump issue. I'm not sure that that's in the cards for him. So what other techniques, if we're just being, cold-blooded hacks here, what other advice would you give to somebody around that issue other than to try to take it off the table by limiting the amount of distance between your position and your opponent's position?
Yeah, but Harper inoculated himself. He's not inoculated himself. He hasn't given his voters or the public a reassuring logic on how he will handle this matter. And so until he addresses it, this was just an admission, not an inoculation. And he can get by this weekend on it, but I don't think he's going to get through the next election doing that.
Yeah, I don't think we've actually
he doesn't feel it, Jordan.
Him answer that.
This is the point I keep making. Like I talked to Jason Kenney this weekend for the Herle Burley, and he's genuinely outraged by the United States and what's going on. He's genuinely outraged, and it comes through in what he says and the way he talks, right? It just is part of his thinking. He's not putting it on. It's just he's genuinely outraged, which tells me this is not a conservative liberal thing, because Jason Kenney's a very conservative guy, but he's outraged about Trump and outraged about the United States. I don't think that Poilievre feels that. I don't think he is.
Yeah, I don't know that he is. And I think maybe I would nuance a bit what Kory is saying, because I think there's a couple stops on that path. If that is indeed the path that Poilievre wants to take, which, to shrink the distance between him and Carney, I'm not actually persuaded that's where he's going. But, the first step is to really appear kind of on the side of Team Canada as led by the Prime Minister. And so we did see, I think that's a bit what we're seeing an attempt to do in the response to the Davos speech, the change a little bit in tone in the Conservative Convention speech. To me, it's more in that ballpark, but that's not the same thing as closing that gap and trying to take the issue off the table. And I agree with you. The reasons why he would be hesitant to do that is because it splits his own vote coalition. He's got between 25 and 30% of his voters who are actually quite sympathetic to Trump. And you saw evidence of this also, by the way, during the convention. What are they doing? Well, they're passing resolutions on getting rid of DEI and things like that. So there are echoes there, and there are ties very much, I think, that are active and very motivating for members. And so it's not a surprise that he wouldn't want to do that at the Conservative Convention. I think what matters is, are we going to see him continue to try to advance down that road and do more? Or is this something that is a temporary stop? And I would say that in the past, we've seen him make attempts to even just make tonal change. Okay. So we've seen attempts to just make tonal change in the past that have not stuck beyond 2 or 3 weeks. So it remains to be seen whether this is a temporary shift or whether this is something that he can sustain. But I did want to make one thing explicit, because I can hear listeners screaming about the double standard, that Carney didn't specifically mention Trump and Davos. So why is it bad that Poilievre
The whole speech was about Trump?
Well, that's it, right? But more to the point is that one of the two of them has a political deficit on the issue to address. One of the two of them, which is Poilievre, there is a doubt about what his view is on that. There is a doubt about the intensity of his feeling, to what you were saying, David. So he has a different task, again, though, with the general population, not with the conservative base. So I think that it remains to be seen. That room was probably not the most favorable place for him to go there if he wanted to, but that is still a big deficit for him. And if the theory that Trump is going to get crazier as we approach the midterms, as his popularity drops, holds, then we can expect that he will continue and, in fact, increasingly insert himself into Canadian politics over the next few months in the window of a potential election. So this is a problem that's actually going to deepen for the Conservatives, not one that's going to go away. So I would hope that we would begin to see more moves from Poilievre, but because what we've seen so far, I think, is really small on this.
Well, we've had two other chronic, criticisms. One is that he sounds too Trumpy, and I think both pointed out earlier, and I had the same observation, particularly of you, Jordan, on this. Sounded more positive, and no, rhyming things those are all changes. If we're saying what part of the problem that he's had on that disconnect that you're talking about is tone, and I think there was a concerted effort to change tone, and the sort of lexicon that he's using, without the the bumper sticker phraseology on everything. So I think that those things are deliberate. In any other rally type speech he's done, also the way he came in, he didn't come in like a prize fighter, at a UFC match. I think there was a more staid presentation. I think all those things are deliberate, and I think they're speaking to looking less like a Trump rally. So I don't know. I maybe. Yep. That's a false observation, but I don't know. That's part of what I took away from it. So maybe these are more subtle than what you're looking for, but I do see signs of that.
I thought first of all, by the way, I have to say this just to be a dink. I don't think the mock student election is a line I would ride very hard in the future. We lost the election campaign that we were supposed to win. I lost my riding where I was supposed to triumph, but we won the student vote in the Elections Canada mock vote. So we own the future. I don't know. That just felt like...
I didn't like it as a line, but I have to say, for him to focus on the engagement that the Conservatives are getting from youth, I think is smart. I think that's a strength.
I would get there through a different line. But anyway, I'm just being a dink. That's a small thing. I thought there were two messages I heard this weekend that I thought were interesting. One was from Steve Outhouse and one was from Jenny. And it's interesting, current and former campaign managers, because I heard Steve saying little bits and pieces of what Kory is saying, like points, just modest adjustments, like look for a more positive. He didn't say it this way, but I think what he was indicating is look for a more positive, less Trumpy message, deliberate focus on hope, just a little bit more. So I saw some of the things there in terms of approach. And then from Jenny, she was addressing the issue that we're talking about, where her argument is you've got to find a way for conservatives have to find a way to marry affordability and Trump. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, they've not arrived at that formula. Otherwise, we would be hearing it. But I think that is the thing to watch for. And if I were the Liberals, that's the thing I'd be afraid of, is make certain that they don't find a way to inoculate themselves on Trump by folding in affordability, creating a logic bridge there that leads you to vote conservative. That, to me, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and I heard, by the way, more in his speech to make that connection between the economic insecurity people are feeling and Trump than I've heard from the Prime Minister.
Well, one other quick little point around this. I thought it was a more patriotic speech in terms of the examples that he was bringing forward. When you're talking about the soldiers in the trenches in World War I, and there was a lot more overlay of what I think is patriotic imagery, and pointing to challenges in the past, as opposed to Canada is broken. These guys are a bunch of shitheads and everything, like the negativity versus the sort of patriotic elements of that. We haven't seen that in the past in the same way, but I think it speaks to the underlying thing you're talking about of, are you going to fold to Trump? Are you like that? Like, are you Canadian patriot at the end of the day? And I think the more you layer that stuff in, the better. Like, we've talked about this ad nauseum about Trudeau. I think one of the worst things he did was shit talk the country and the country's history. And I think it's the wrong path to be down. I don't think the way you counteract that is by shit talking the country yourself. I think it's by doing the opposite. I think it's like going back to more like a Pearsonian complexion of your political rhetoric.
I saw that too. I would just say it can get undone if they don't handle the separatism issue correctly, and I think they're dangerously close to flubbing it.
Yeah.
So let's just go right into this. We only have a few minutes. We got to be really tight here. And I'm going to just read you something from the CTV, which is about the interview that Danielle Smith, Premier Smith, did with Vashi Kaphaus. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says members of her caucus can sign whatever petitions they want to, including one pushing for a referendum on the province's independence from Canada. I don't police the responses of my MLAs. They can sign whatever petition that they want, Smith told CTV Question Period host Vashi Kaphaus. But I would say that my approach and the approach of our caucus as a united caucus has been to support a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, Smith added. That means that the federal government respects our areas of jurisdiction just as we respect their areas of jurisdiction. I think we're moving in the right direction on that, but not completely. My question to you is this. Assuming that there's a referendum, who's the pro-Canada team in the referendum? Who leads the campaign for Canada in Alberta?
Jason Kenney is kind of who, in many respects, I think is the person leading it today. But I think it'd be a mistake to have just one person. Like, I think you want to have, a committee of people that are speaking to a broader, spectrum of Albertans. But I think it's got to be Albertans. Like, I think it would be a mistake to have too many people outside the province. Like, I think people outside the province can, send their messages of, of love and appreciation to Alberta. But right. I think the primary voices that are speaking on that have to be Albertans. And, I think it's got to be a pretty broad coalition. Like, maybe it's Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley and a bunch of other people, right? Like, it's a very different coalition of folks. And I
How
think
about the leader of the province? How about the elected leader of the province? Isn't that just table stakes?
Well, but I think it's clear she's not going to do that.
She's not going to do that.
That's why I chose this clipping.
I know.
You can't be more ambivalent than she is.
But no, it is worse than that, David. It's not ambivalent. It's not. It's permissive, and it's encouraging. It's not ambivalent. Right. And I would say that this is that response is the kind of bullshit that in ordinary times you might get away with, but we are not in ordinary times. We have a southern neighbor who has expressed a clear desire to take over in some way, economically, maybe even more than that, our country. And they're not dumb. They know where the oil is. And they're going to have things to say about a referendum in Alberta that could be very destabilizing, regardless of what the outcome of that is. So in this circumstance, I would argue the responsible bar is much higher for the Premier than what she is saying. That allowing her MPs to support separatist causes, members of the government, that carries huge weight. And I think that there is a cautionary tale around this. And I know the argument about letting off steam and that was the same thing that drove Brexit. So we have to be very careful about that. And I think that she really deserves to be called out for this, because it is not value neutral to say that in this circumstance.
People don't want me to lecture on this. And I agree with Kory. The discussion should be held largely in Alberta, but let's not pretend that the rest of us don't have a voice and a concern in the same way when we've had this debate in the past about Quebec, because we are affected. But I would say first, her argument is untrue. When she says, I don't police what my caucus say or think or sign, well, that's bullshit. She did for Peter Guthrie. She kicked him out of caucus and cabinet when he was critical of her policies. So if you can be removed for being contrary to your policies, surely to Christ, the unity of the country and Alberta remaining within Confederation ought to rise to the standard of being worthy of at least scrutiny. So I don't like that line of argumentation. I would make this argument. I think this is politically dangerous. No one cares that I don't like it. Of course, I don't like it. Of course, I think the Premier of Alberta should be obligated and instant in her defense of Canada and say, look, Canada first, that is the right way to go. I am against this. I will campaign against it vigorously. Everybody in my caucus must hold that line. And then turn and say, and with that, I will then beat the living hell out of Ottawa for policies that are beneficial to Alberta and yada, yada, yada. But it can't be the other way. Canada can't be conditional upon securing certain policy outcomes from Ottawa. Your belief in Confederation ought not to be conditional. But I also think this is bad political strategy, because I think at some point this consumes your government. This eats you up. And in this dynamic with Trump, it's not like Alberta is Texas, okay? It's still in Canada. An overwhelming number of people in Alberta who will vote in the next general election provincially do believe that Trump's hostilities toward Canada are to be rebuffed. And they believe that a strong, united Canada makes sense. And you don't have to be contradictory on those things. You can be for Alberta and for Canada, but you have to start with for Canada. And I just think that that's going to get her into a world where she's going to fuel this thing, and it's going to start to eat up her government and her party. And I think it's really politically short-sighted. You won't be able to run and hide from this thing.
Kory, do you think there's any way she ends up being a supporter of Canada in the referendum?
Well, I think she is. I think she is now, personally. But I think if you were to take the approach of no one in my caucus can sign this petition or any of those things, I think she wouldn't be the leader.
Right.
So I think she's constrained by that party constitution and the caucus that she has, and I think she's got a delicate line to watch. I'm going to channel a little Chantal Hébert here, that I think she's kind of in Robert Bourassa territory in the last Quebec referendum. I think when a good chunk of your party support base supports sovereignty, you're in a different position than you are where that isn't true. And like, especially when you're in this sort of hyper democratic, direct democracy sort of party constitution where you can basically be tossed at any moment as party leader. So I think she's quite constrained. Do I think that she's a Canadian patriot? Yeah, absolutely I do. And, I'll say that on the basis of having known her a very long time. But, how heavy a fist can she come down on her caucus around these things? And what kind of rhetoric can she use and still continue to be the leader of the party? I think it's more constrained than you might think.
So, Kory, I know that nobody out there will believe this when I say it, because their conventional wisdom is that they have no power. But between Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre, it feels to me like rural Albertans and rural Saskatchewanians have quite a bit of political influence right now.
I think they do, but I don't think it's what the support levels look like in the general population in a general election. It's exactly what we're just talking about in the Conservative Party convention. Like what the people who vote on her continued leadership of the UCP is not the same as the composition of the people who vote for her in a general election. It just isn't.
Maybe it's an ungovernable party. I mean, at 8 Jason, maybe it will lead her. But I still think at some point, the dog has got to wag the tail and not the other way around. And when something as important as the unity of the country is on at stake, I'd like to see the dog.
Well, and she's feeding the beast, which may end up consuming her.
The rural prairies are so deeply alienated from everything that's going on in the country. It's really quite something.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Right. Okay, we got to wrap up. Kory's got to go start his new gig. So let's, Mr. Pinsent, let's hurry up and grab everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Kory, you got a Hey You before you go?
I got a Hey You. I'm going to be in Ottawa later this week for the unveiling of the portrait of Stephen Harper, his prime ministerial portrait. And we're going to have a giant class.
This should never have happened for 400, Alex.
We're going to have essentially
it's a daily double. How much would you like to gamble? The rest of your professional life? Yes.
Well, we're going to have a big class reunion. We're going to have a big dinner, and it's going to be great to catch up with colleagues from my days in the Harper administration. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody. There are good moments and bad moments in politics. We've all lived through many of them, and ones like this, a good moment for me was a bad moment for you. But look, it's important to mark these things, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody. So. Anyway, hey, Stephen Harper, I was proud to serve in your administration and looking forward to seeing you and all of our former colleagues later this week.
Hear, hear. Very nice.
Awesome. It was a simpler time.
All right, Jordan.
Yeah, so I got a couple this week. I just wanted to say a word about the passing of Christy Duncan because I think that she is, among many other qualities, she was just one of the fucking nicest people on Parliament Hill, genuinely, during her time there. And I think she actually did so much also during her battle with cancer to really share that experience honestly with other people who are going through that. And I think that mattered a lot. And so just huge condolences to her family and to her many friends and colleagues because she was really a good one. And then my second, because there is no shortage of opinions, is going out to Minister Andy Sangre, who I think...
Well done, by the way.
Not too hard. It's available to you too, David.
My Tamil friends say it's Ananda Sangre.
Okay, Ananda Sangre. There we go.
That's not how he pronounces
Minister, you gave an interview to CP where you did not really profess an opinion about what's happening on Minnesota. So I wanted to recommend to you to watch an availability that Wab Canoe did because he gave what is a far better line on what's happening in Minnesota. which is that he is not going to check how much money he has in his pocket before he expresses an opinion about what happened to the 2 protesters who were killed. Okay? And that is the right response. It is not the right response to say that Canada is not Minnesota. Minnesota wasn't fucking Minnesota 3 weeks ago. Okay? And you need to find a way to walk the line of holding true to values that the vast majority of Canadians share, which is that peaceful protesters should not be gunned down in the street, and to do so in a way that is frank and honest with Canadians. The kind of response you gave in that CP article is just super damning. So take some notes from Wob. He did it right.
Taking political notes from Wob Canoe. Bye, Kory.
I gotta go.
We'll see you in 4 months, brother. Good luck to you.
All right.
Bye, Kory. Not too much good luck, just a little bit.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Bye. Well,
Scott, you got a hey you?
Yeah, and I'm glad Kory's gone, because I'll start by echoing his hey you and just saying, you know what? It is as painful a professional moment as I've lived through 2006, but I will also say one of the most delightful times I've had in our post-political years, David, or post-06 years at least, was going to Paul's portrait unveiling. And so I've talked to a lot of friends.
Even though the portrait looks literally nothing like Paul Martin.
It doesn't look at all like Paul.
Like him. I'm interested if does the Stephen Harper thing look like Stephen Harper?
David, if you got a portrait painted of you, would it look exactly like you?
I'm hoping
I would hope it would be recognizable. As it is, people are going to walk through the rows of prime ministers and go, "Who the hell is that? I don't remember that person being prime minister."
Nothing would make me more happy if they pull the curtain down and it is a lovely portrait of Adrian Clarkson. I wish everybody well. A particular shout out to my buddy Art, who's going to be chairing the Art Milne's going to be chairing the fireside chat at the National Archives with. So it's a fun time. So everybody join together. My real hey you goes out to those pukes in the State Department, in Trump's State Department, who are meeting with officials. So at first nobody would say who it was. Now there's some reference from the United States that there were people at State Department that met with the Alberta separatist representatives. Piss off. Stay out of our shit. Okay, it's bad enough that you won't trade with us. It's bad enough that you say we're not going to trade with you, and we're not going to allow you to trade with other people at our whim. It's bad enough that you're marching around the schoolyard trying to take people's milk money, but you don't get to come into our country and say we want to legitimize this separatist movement. That is really out of bounds. I mean, it just demonstrates yet once again the complete lack of respect they have, and they're doing it with the AFD all across fucking Europe and Germany and similar movements and National Front movements in Europe. But fuck off. It's our country, not yours. And stay out.
Quaint that you still think about bounds and these guys.
Yeah. I'll just pick up on that and give my hey you to Premier Eby in British Columbia. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I want to really congratulate him, because I loved his response to hearing about those meetings. I love the fact that he called it treasonous. I love the fact that he took a very strong and emotionally compelling stance for Canada. It was obviously genuine, and he was outraged, as people should be outraged about what is happening. And I loved all that. Having said that, I think that having taken up that mantle and put yourself in that position, it probably means you're going to have to think hard about this pipeline issue.
Yep.
If you're going to play a significant role in healing this and in defeating badly separatist forces in Quebec, I think that having a plausible path for a pipeline is a critical part of that. So, Premier Eby, I think you're going to have to think hard about your position on that to be consistent with your tremendous belief in the country. So, hey, you. Hey, guys.
Hey.
We'll be back here with another Conservative to be named later. Actually,
we're in the GM's office, and we're looking through prospects.
We couldn't be luckier.
Full of Conservatives.
We couldn't be luckier. We have Fred Delory, who's prepared to step in and fill Kory's spot next week. So, nobody better understanding the Conservative Party and the Conservative movement in the country right now. We're lucky to have him. So we'll be back, the three of us, next week with Fred Delory, Aaron O'Toole's campaign manager in 2021. We'll see you then. We'll have more to talk about, I'm sure. In the meantime, take care of yourself, and thanks to all of our sponsors for making this show available to you. Take care.